It's the show set before, during, and after a pandemic that was shot before, during, and well, hopefully we'll get to the after. HBO's Station 11 is a post-apocalyptic miniseries based off the book by Emily St. John Mandel, and I don't think I've seen a show since Netflix's The OA which has left me with so many unanswered questions. So naturally I wanted to tackle this epic tale which spans more than 20 years and get to the bottom of what exactly is Station 11. The final episode opens on Miranda Carroll, the author of Station 11, a graphic novel which has taken her years to write. The novel itself is a byproduct of trauma. As a child, Miranda and her family were stuck in a hurricane when a live wire electrocuted everyone but her. She was saved because she just so happened to be coloring on the countertop away from the water. It's no wonder then that when Arthur Leander interprets one of her drawings that we see the book's protagonist, a spaceman named Dr. 11, is really a metaphor for Miranda herself. In episode 3, Arthur Leander describes the Doctor as alone but not unhappy, adrift and exhausted, but because he wears a suit, people don't realize what a warm and light heart he has. This is essentially describing Miranda, it's just that instead of a spacesuit that she wears, she protects herself by being distant.
But even when you're here, you're not here.
Miranda leaves Arthur right before the flu that will kill 99.9% of people on Earth. It's her biggest regret.
Why wasn't I with my love when he died?
She's halfway around the world in Malaysia when we flash back a few days earlier to young Kirsten, Miranda, and Arthur backstage at the theater where Arthur performs King Lear.
Who's that?
He's the asshole that ruined my life.
Kirsten obtains one of only 5 copies of Station 11, and this book will end up shaping her life. Whereas the book was born of trauma, it becomes a beacon of hope for Kirsten, and although the story is a fictitious tale about a spaceman drifting alone through space to be found and saved again, it's ultimately a tale about universal truths. That although we may be damaged and escape that damage, there is hope that one day we'll be reunited with those we love. As Miranda dies from the flu, she receives a call from Clark Thompson, one of Arthur's friends, informing her that Arthur has died. But the universe has a strange way of working out. Clark just happened to be on the same flight as Arthur's wife Elizabeth and son Tyler. Not only that, but the pilot of the Gitchagumi, a plane still on the tarmac at the Severn City Airport where Clark is stranded, happens to have the same name as the hurricane that killed Miranda's family. In fact, he was named after it. She's able to track down the pilot's cell number and tells him to lock the passengers inside. There is no rescue mission coming, and if those infected with the flu get out, they'll infect those safe within the airport. This all leads to one of the defining moments in the series. Days after all the passengers aboard the Gitchagumi are believed to be dead, Tyler sees a survivor emerge and brings him into the airport, believing him to be immune and no threat to the others. This ends up with the man being shot and Clark uttering the words,
"We are not monsters!"
And that word, monsters, can be found in the novel where Dr. 11 exclaims, "To the monsters, we are the monsters." And this is uttered throughout the series.
To the monsters, we're the monsters.
For those survivors at the airport, the monsters are those infected in the Gitchagumi and should be exterminated. But for the passengers in the Gitchagumi, the monsters are those that held them on the tarmac. Each sees each other as the monster. This analogy is echoed to Jeevan by young Kirsten when they hunt wolves.
To the monsters, we're the monsters.
What is happening?
We see wolves as monsters because they attack us, but they see us as monsters because we attack them. This actually plays out when Jeevan is mauled by a wolf named Big Daddy in episode 9. The killing of the innocent Gitchagumi passenger is arguably one of the biggest turning points for Tyler. He sees life before the flu as traumatic, and any attempt to get civilization back to the way it was should be stopped. For example, when the topic of repopulating the Earth comes up, he says,
"Maybe we shouldn't, though. Repopulate?"
And when he suggests deleting the last article he downloaded from the internet before it went down, an article that describes capitalism, his mother says,
"We just invented again."
So when Clark becomes the de facto leader of the airport and decides to turn it into a museum honoring the achievements of the before times, Tyler isn't having it. Although there's much more to Tyler's decision here, he ends up faking his own death by lighting the Gitchagumi on fire. Most of the series takes place 20 years after the pandemic as we follow adult Kirsten and a group known as the Traveling Symphony. They travel around Lake Michigan performing Shakespeare to various communities littered around the lake, but there's a lot of interesting elements events that are all converging at this one point at the airport. First, we have adult Tyler, now known as the Prophet. He's used the Station 11 book to brainwash a group of kids, acting as a sort of cult leader. As he told Alex in episode 4, he believes those born after the pandemic are special.
The first human generation to be rid from trauma. And the survivors were the only liars left.
He even gets them to be used as child soldiers who suicide bomb at his bidding. But in his eyes, he's not the monster, he's doing good. It all goes back to the line from the book, "To the monsters, we are the monsters." At the same time, Sarah, the Traveling Symphony's composer, has a heart attack. This forces Elizabeth to call a doctor who just happens to be Jeevan, the man who cared for Kirsten during the first year of the pandemic, but was separated from her after his wolf attack. Jeevan has gone on his own personal journey, starting off as a man who suffered from panic attacks and couldn't connect with children, to one who has a family and remains calm even in the face of death. He would learn to become a doctor from Deborah, who says the hardest part of being a doctor isn't knowing all the science, it's
the courage to bear witness to death. The courage to be there.
And this is exactly what Jeevan does when he is there for Sarah at her death. Fun fact, St. Deborah is the name of the first town the Traveling Symphony plays, and it's named after Deborah, who delivered multiple babies in one night during the first year of the pandemic. So now we have Kirsten, Tyler, Jeevan, and the Traveling Symphony all in one place for a performance of Hamlet. And to make things even more meta, Tyler will play the role of Hamlet, his actual mother that of Gertrude, Hamlet's mother, and Clark, Claudius, the usurper who killed Hamlet's father. So when I say things are meta, it gets even more crazy. For example, the play Hamlet features a play within it, The Murder of Gonzago, and now we're watching a TV show that has a play within a play that takes place after a pandemic while we ourselves are facing our own pandemic. It's pretty wild. While Tyler is captured, Kirsten tells him to look at a specific scene from Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 4, which is all about Hamlet confronting his mother about marrying his father's brother. It gets at Tyler's innermost feeling of betrayal. Meanwhile, Clark has put a stop to the play, believing that a rendition of Hamlet, a show which is about a man rebelling against authority, may give the impressionable youth ideas. But when he finds out Kirsten is the same girl he met 20 years ago backstage at King Lear, he lets them go on with the show, with him in the role as Claudius.
It's what Arthur would have wanted.
The play goes on and Tyler is given Kirsten's knife to kill Clark on stage. This knife was the same one that killed Jeevan's brother Frank in Chicago years ago. Tyler ends up not going through with it.
Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. All that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity.
Not only are these Gertrude's real lines in Act 1 of Hamlet, but her way of telling her son that he can't spend his whole life with his eyes to the ground remembering his father, that what lives must die eventually, passing to eternity. Tyler realizes this and will end up leaving with his mother and army of kids. At the after party, the musicians sing Midnight Train to Georgia, which may be a slight nod to the book since the flu in Station 11 is called the Georgia flu. It's here we also get the heartfelt reunion between Kirsten and Jeevan. They don't even say a word to each other in the scene, just embrace. And the series ends with the Traveling Symphony venturing off to their next town. Kirsten and Jeevan say goodbye. Jeevan talks about how a long time ago he met a girl and walked her home. It's a play on words. Not only did he walk Kirsten home 20 years ago, but she is now in a place where she has a home. If it weren't for Jeevan, she would have never found it. He even says as they get to the crossroads, "There goes your family," and she agrees. Even though these two characters went through so much damage, they found each other and their home. As the Station 11 book says,
I have found you 9 times before, maybe 10.
Although we may go our separate ways as depicted by the crossroads here, there is always a way back. Another time where we'll meet again. And you might have a different interpretation of this ending. It's purposely ambiguous. In episode 8, Frank asks Kirsten what happens at the end of the novel, but Kirsten replies that the story ends before we find out. Kind of like the show. We don't know where Tyler will end up, what's next for Kirsten, or what will happen to Jeevan's family. All we know is that they've found each other many times before and will probably see each other again. The argument Frank ends up making is that the ending the author wants you to see doesn't matter. It's the journey and your own interpretation that's important. While the ending of Station 11 is pretty open-ended, it still gives us some cathartic moments and hope that these characters will see each other again. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.